them? Well, think again. Welcome to the Freudian Slip, where we spill the tea in psychology. My name is Anna Freud, the daughter of the infamous Sigmund Freud, a name heard around the psychological world, and I'm going to be one of your hosts for tonight.
Hello, my name is Melanie Klein, and I'm here to psychoanalyze.
I am your host, Margaret Floyd Washburn, and I am here to sensationalize this story.
And I'm Letta Setter Hollingsworth, your guide into the human mind. Today we're here to discuss with you the life and work of Thomas Reid, a leader in the philosophy of common sense.
Thomas Reid is best known for his work in common sense philosophy and is a bit of a skeptic himself when it comes to skepticism. Now, today we have with us Thomas Reid, a self-proclaimed Thomas Reid expert, to answer our questions and provide us with a greater understanding of who Thomas Reid really was and what exactly his beliefs are.
Thomas, how are you today?
Great, thank you guys for having me.
It is so good to have you here with us. We are glad that we could finally find a time that worked. So, tell us, why did you choose to dedicate your life to learning and knowing all about the psychological phenomena of Thomas Reid, seeing as he most definitely is not a household name?
Well, Thomas Reid is one of the most underappreciated psychological brains of his time. He was born on April 6th in Strachan in the UK and died 86 years later in Glasgow.
Is it true he was one of 12 children?
Yes, his parents were Lewis Reid and Margaret Gregory. His life is so interesting because he got to live through two massive times of change. He was part of the Scottish Enlightenment in the 1740s and also lived during the time of the Industrial Revolution, both huge events in our world's history.
That is very interesting.
So, Brahmas, I read that Thomas Reid was also a parish minister. Please, tell us what you know about that.
Well, there's not much to say about that. He was licensed to work in the Church of Scotland when he was 21, but left to pursue knowledge in philosophy.
And his pursuit in philosophy was quite interesting. I see here that he is known as the father of common sense philosophy, which, as it roots, is the idea that if you go back to the basic common sense principles, it'll help deal with problems engendered by the skeptic views. Can you explain this a little bit more to me?
Yes, actually, the skeptic views in which Thomas was referring to were created and held by David Hume. Thomas Reid was constantly attacking him for his philosophies.
Margaret, you would find it interesting that Thomas Reid actually believed in sensation is an original and simple operation of how we think.
Yes, I believe that it's so fascinating. I think, I never thought that it would be that deep, you know? That sensation plays that big of a role in our thoughts.
It is. He really held on to the philosophy that there is a clear distinction between sensation and perception.
I completely understand that. Making sense of the world around us is very challenging.
I read Thomas Reid's book, An Inquiry into the Human Mind on Principles of Common Sense. It was very enlightening on his exact beliefs and how we as people should understand the boundaries between sensation and perception.
That is a great read. If you haven't already read it, I suggest that you read his essay on the intellectual powers of man that he published in 1785. It is very grounding.
Brahmas, we did compile two questions here that we did want to ask if we had a chance to ask Thomas Reid, but since he's clearly no longer with us, we figured you would be the best person to ask. So we just ask that you answer these as he would, not as yourself, to help us gain a greater understanding of his mind, thoughts, and beliefs.
Fire away.
So, Ramus, think through Thomas's eyes. How would you view personal identity?
Well, as Thomas, I would say that personal identity is a matter of self-perception. How one would generate their own moral understanding is a question of one's competence in self-construct. Locke's memory theory says that personal identity is based on memory, but I, as Thomas Reid, say that memory is not sufficient for personal identity. Personal identity is very simple and practically unanalyzable.
Great answer. Personal identity is sometimes thought of to be so much more than what it actually is. I like how you said it was very simple.
The second question we have for you, Thomas, is what is the basis of your belief in God, and how is it essential to your philosophy for the systems and thoughts?
As Thomas was a strong and devout Christian, the belief of God that he carried in his work is what provided for him. God created humans to think and communicate rationally, so the philosophy of common sense relies on the nature of the creation from the author.
Wow, it is so honest and straightforward that Thomas believes that. God is the higher being to complete and understand human nature, common sense.
It was so great hearing your thoughts today, Ramos. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. It looks like our time here is about up. Don't let your
Id.
Ego.
Or superego.
have all the fun. Join us next time on Freudian Slip for an interesting interview with your favorite host and psychological goats. See you next time.